All right, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you had a good weekend, good Lord's Day, good everything. And we are going to finish up the Russell Moore and Mikey Cosper episode that they did about Doug Wilson a couple weeks back. Let's begin. All right. I've been on a little bit of a citrus kick lately with the Zyn, you know what I mean? Usually I do peppermint, but I saw it got me. The advertising, the product placement, the celebrity endorsements, they got me. I saw a picture of Bryce Harper in the batter's box, and he had some citrus in. And I've liked citrus in the past, but it got me thinking, maybe I need a little citrus in my life. And so I grabbed some, and these days I'm just feeling a little zestier than normal. You know what I mean? In any case, I don't know about it. Zesty. That sounds a little gay. Sorry about that. I apologize. In any case, let's get back to this here. But before we begin, let me just remind you that my podcast today is sponsored by Covenant Recruiter. And Covenant Recruiter is helping out a company, a Christian agricultural engineering company, who is looking for a new electrical engineer to help them with a variety of different things. It's a great job. It's a great group of people, solid Christians, Dominion mindset, and all of that applied to engineering in the agricultural space. Absolutely fantastic. Reach out to me. Let me know if you want me to connect you with the team, and we can talk more about that at some other time. I'll put the video introducing that job at the end of this video. So if you are an electrical engineer, you're potentially on the job market, you want to work with Christians with a Dominion mindset, go to the end of this video, watch the introduction to the job, and reach out to me. In any case, I wanted to do something a little bit unusual today. Definitely a little unusual. And I want to go ahead and agree with Russell Moore. That's right. Not everything Russell Moore says is wrong, and sometimes you just gotta, take what he says and try to put the most positive spin on it. And that's what I'm gonna do today, because I think that Russell Moore is telling the truth here, and we're gonna explore it. So let's begin. I'm starting again. This is the Bulletin.
The Bulletin, episode 199.
I'm starting around minute, 21. Man, this is long. Can you imagine watching this or listening to this every? Because you know how like some people they can't wait till another episode drops. Can you imagine being that way, but about the Bulletin? That's a sad state of affairs. Anyway, let's continue.
The importance of masculinity, the roles of men. In the CNN interview, there's a lot of conversation about why, for instance, Wilson would argue that men should be in the military and women shouldn't. The differentiation of roles, this kind of thing. When the broader culture is constantly denigrating traditional visions of masculinity and maleness, if I put myself in Pete Hegseth's shoes, when Wilson shows up in your world and is saying,
Mike Cosper and Pete Hegseth could not be more different, but he's going to try to put himself in his shoes.
Here's what it means to be a man, and being a man is good. We shouldn't be surprised that this stuff has resonance when progressive ideology has essentially denigrated masculinity for a long time.
I've had to deal pastorally with a lot of young men who have gotten involved in the Doug Wilson stuff. They do not become responsible, faithful men. They become losers who are finding a way somehow to blame women for their own lack of responsibility and are able to somehow supplement the normal, ordinary 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus vision of what it means to be a responsible man with making sarcastic comments while drinking bourbon and smoking cigars.
All right, so that's the big clip, right? He says, Russell Moore says, in the only way that he knows how, it sounds like a little weasel, but he says that he's had to deal pastorally with a lot of these guys. I talked about this in the last episode, but I gotta say, I was thinking about it this weekend, and I believe him. That's right, I believe him. Because think about the context that we're talking about here. We're talking about a guy, a man, who is in a position to be pastorally subordinate or subordinate to a pastor who's being pastoral on you, named Russell Wilson. Think about the kind of guy you'd have to be. And you start getting into some Doug Wilson stuff, right? You start, maybe you're secretive about it. You have your private little study, Doug Wilson study group. You hide the books when pastor comes over. You know what I mean? You've got like a bookshelf, and there's like a secret button that removes the books. You got Tim Keller up there, Platt, all the normal stuff. And then when your pastor leaves, you push the button. Then you got like Doug Wilson and Rushdoony and all that kind of stuff, right? You've got the secret spot stash. Anyway, then you talk to your pastor about it, and think about the kind of guy that is. If Russell Moore is your pastor, there's a very good chance that you're a loser. Just that's who you are. You are a loser because Russell Moore is your pastor. And then you start getting into the Doug Wilson stuff, and so it's not like Doug Wilson automatically transforms you from a loser to a winner. You still kind of are struggling. I mean, think about where you were when you first discovered, how awesome Christianity was, right? Like just in general, you think about the kind of things that you used to think, right? I think I'm putting myself back into this position. I remember when I discovered Rushdoony. When I discovered Rushdoony, I had a lot of weird thoughts, and luckily I've deleted all my social media from back then. In fact, I left social media for a while. But you probably could still find some of my more embarrassing takes back then. I was a loser. There's no question about it. And then there's that transition period where you're kind of discovering that, oh, yeah, Christianity doesn't require you to, chop off your testicles and become a woman in order to be Christ-like. No, you can actually still be an actual man, and you can actually still do, normal, masculine things and enjoy them and be a Christian. You could actually still be pretty based and be a Christian. There's that transition period where it's a little awkward, and maybe you go a little overboard, right? And that's probably when Russell Moore kind of loses his grip on people. Like Russell Moore will come in, they'll try to do some surgical strikes to try to stop you from going too much into this kind of stuff. And maybe some of them will get scared off and come back to the fold of David Platt and Tim Keller and all that stuff. And then some will just leave, right? They'll just leave. And so what Russell Moore stops interacting with them at that point. So as far as he's concerned, they're still losers. You know what I mean? Because when they left me, they were losers. But now, so to give Russell Moore a lot of credit, from his point of view, these men just go and become losers. And it's not that they became losers; they always were losers. But now they're losers that disagree with Russell Moore on this kind of stuff. And so he's very upset about it, and maybe they said some awkward things, maybe about women, maybe about whatever, masculinity, and they were still in that awkward kind of transitional phase, right? When I first became a theonomist, I probably said some wild stuff. I mean, let's just face it, that's how it goes, right? You're not practiced yet, you're not, dare I say, nuanced enough yet, you're not realistic enough. It's more of an ideology for you, so. It's just you say wild stuff as if it's like just totally normal, and you're not quite sure about it 100%. You're just out there in the cage stage, right? It's an awkward time for all of us when we're in the cage stage. And so Russell Moore, he's kind of brought up these losers in Christ, and then they're still losers, but they're transitioning into the Doug Wilson stuff, and then they either go back to the fold of the Russell Moores, Tim Kellers, and whatever, and then they're fine. Then they're not losers anymore, even though they still are objectively losers. But either that or they leave and they don't talk to you anymore because they realize how girly you are. That's how it goes. And so in his mind, they all become losers. So I don't think Russell Moore is lying here. I just think from he has a hard time getting out of his perspective, right? Because he thinks liberalism is Christianity. That's what he thinks. He thinks that that's what it is. So if you're not saying the liberal things that he's saying, then you're no longer a Christian. You're just a loser. But even though you're objectively a loser even before, but now you're a loser and he doesn't know you anymore. So there you go. So I want to get Russell Moore's back here a little bit. I think from his perspective, This is what always happens. But the thing is, obviously, his perspective is not reality. Obviously, his perspective is not what's really going on. That's why you get the counter punches from Moscow that show all of the non-losers out there that are, in the Doug Wilson orbit, right? And there's plethora of those people. But from Russell Moore's perspective, they're not even Christians, basically. Those guys are you crazy? Did you hear what he said? He said that we need more executions in the United States. Well, how could that be Christian? How could that be Christian? I don't like commenting on this stuff. The video that came out of that the black guy on the subway that just slaughtered that white woman, and just out of nowhere just started stabbing her and stuff like that. I don't like commenting on that stuff. I just don't like spreading that kind of stuff. The video, the picture, it's just disturbing. It disturbs me. But that guy should have been executed years ago. Years ago. People are debating whether or not to execute him now. Like, no, like, yes, we should definitely do that. But he should have been executed years ago. I mean, we should have many more executions in this country. People like to look at El Salvador as an example for what the United States could be. And El Salvador has done a fantastic job with crime. You know what I mean? It used to be the murder capital of the world. Now it's like there's barely any murders there. Now it's like there's the crime rate has just completely tanked, and that's the reason why is because Bukele has just decided to arrest all the gang members. You're a gang member, you're arrested. Well, I didn't do anything. Well, you're still arrested. You're a gang member. And so he's cleaned up the streets. But the thing about El Salvador that's interesting is they don't have the death penalty there. I think they banned it in the 80s or something like that, and they never brought it back. And so they have these huge prisons that they're overcrowded, of course, but they're just taking them all off the streets. And, of course, it's had a very positive result on the country. I've been to El Salvador. I've been to El Salvador back when it was the murder capital of the world. Very dangerous place. But anyway, so people like to say that's an example. I think we could actually do better. That's a good middle ground, what Bukele is doing. We could actually do better. I mean, of course, we should be executing murderers. That goes without say, basically, in Christianity. If you're a Christian, that should go without say. If somebody murders someone, they should be executed quickly, very quickly, when they're convicted. But we should have much more executions than that. In fact, I think that if people are continuously doing dangerous crimes, that they should be executed after a certain amount of crimes. Like, I'm not saying it's a 3-strike rule, but that's probably around what it should be. You know what I mean? You rob people 3 times. Okay, well, that's enough. And now you've got to go meet your maker. You can't be here anymore. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And people will say, well, what about if they repent? What if they're a Christian? And Bukele has a great answer for that. He says, look, I understand. Christians, they believe that, of course, anyone can be forgiven of any sin. And he says, but this is what he says. He says, but that's up to God. That's up to God. Here on earth, I'm the magistrate. I've got a duty too, and I can't decide whether just to forgive someone or not. Like, I've got a duty here. So, no, you chop somebody's head off. No, you're going to jail. I don't care if you say you're sorry. I don't care if you see the light. Like, that's going to be fine with you at the judgment with the Lord. But as for here, you had your shot, and you decided to chop someone's head off, so now you're in prison forever. See, that's a middle ground, right? We should have more executions here. Anyway, I don't even know what my point was, but the point is, I don't even remember what my point was, but let's continue.
And having that as a substitute in, if you throw in some racist comments and call women derogatory terms, that makes it even better. That does not work. And so you don't even have, even at the pragmatic level, the picture of this. Look at, how can you argue with the results? Look at the results. They're terrifying. They're off.
They are terrifying, that's for sure. I think you got to give Russell a little bit of slack here. I think he's telling the truth. From his perspective, that's how he sees it, right? He's not even aware of the alternative perspective where, people in Doug's orbit are actually very successful human beings. He doesn't see it from that perspective. Give him a little credit.
I think that word blame is really important, because if this is Doug Wilson's theology playing out on the micro level, when we talk about society, when we talk about the nation, we're seeing that on a grand scale. And it seems to mesh with this idea that Mr. Wilson put forth in the CNN interview that a Christian nation was one where certain people just didn't really belong.
So one of the reasons we have such problems with assimilating Muslims
we talked about this already.
all these different Hindus is that there are so many of them, right? So if we had a Christian republic and a Muslim came to Disneyland with his family, we have no problems. But when they fill up Dearborn, Michigan, that's just not. You can. It says in Amos 3:3, can two walk together except they be agreed? You cannot put alien worldviews together cheek by jowl. And
or not even in Muslims. In the case of Muslims, he doesn't even think they should be here. They should be deported.
This really just Christian nationalism laid bare for us.
Yes, because it's a denial of the gospel of Jesus Christ, which says that external conformity is not enough. And this is a vision of a kind of authoritarian external conformity that says if you're Jewish, you can be here, but you're not allowed to be publicly Jewish in your synagogues. If you're Muslim, you're allowed to be here, but you're not allowed to be publicly, or not even in Muslims. In the case of Muslims, he doesn't even think they should be here. They should be deported. It's an external view of authority that is built on this really cruel hierarchical model that goes back to those arguments on slavery. Think about how much better enslaved people were treated on the plantations than they might have been somewhere else. The argument is insidious, and the argument is satanic, ultimately.
It's insidious, it's satanic. Why? Why is it that way? Well, because of the gospel. The gospel says that to be a Christian, external conformity is not enough. Okay, I can go with that. What does that have to do with being a citizen or being allowed in the country, right? What does that have to do with it? We're talking about salvation here, or what are we talking about? Well, who knows? It's just somehow it's the gospel. Somehow it's the gospel, right? See, the gospel says that external conformity is not enough. But Russell Moore now says that the gospel is also about how external conformity, no, we don't even want that. We want the gospel. Listen, the gospel says that Jews can be Jews publicly, right? And that's good. That's a good thing to be a Jew publicly. The gospel, guys, you don't understand. The gospel says that if you're a Muslim, you should be able to be a Muslim publicly, and bowing down to the rock over there in Saudi Arabia, wherever it is, and you should be able to do that publicly. I mean, it's no problem. I mean, if you're a Hindu, we're talking about the gospel here, guys. The gospel says you have the right to publicly worship Vishnu and the other millions of other demons that they decide to worship at any given time whenever they feel like it. Obviously, guys, you gotta say, the gospel says it. This is a gospel issue. And if you disagree with Russell Moore that the gospel says that you should be able to bow down to the rock and, follow the Prophet Muhammad and worship Vishnu and whatever other demon you want to worship, if you say that you shouldn't be able to do that, that's insidious. That's satanic. Because the gospel says that all of that demon worship should be allowed in public, obviously, because, of course, the gospel teaches us that external conformity is not enough. I mean, what is he talking about? But his audience eats it up. They're like, yeah, the gospel, of course, the gospel. You should worship Vishnu if you want to. You remember in Indiana Jones, Kali, the cult of the Kali Ma? You should be able to do that publicly because that's the gospel says so. It says, listen, you guys don't understand. This is what you might not understand. The gospel says that external conformity is not enough. So how dare you say that you shouldn't be able to have a Kali cult in Austin, Texas? How dare you? That's the argument. That's his argument. And Clarissa is there like, oh, yeah, that's right. This Christian nationalism sounds dangerous. And Cosper's there like, oh, of course. If they want to watch Vishnu, they should watch Vishnu.
And the fact that we're at a point where the Overton window has moved so far that people are able to listen to this and yawn tells us where we are.
What is the Christian response to these kind of things on a very practical level when I'm talking to my neighbor, to the friend who forwards me that reel on Instagram?
I think the pressure is to ignore it because it's easy for really grounded, discipled Christian people to look at that and say, well, that's so crazy and so vulgar, and everybody knows how stupid this stuff is.
That was the first. So he's saying that that's the natural inclination, and he's being truthful because that's the first thing they tried, right? They tried to ignore it, right? Because they think, well, any Christian, any real Christian, remember, from his perspective, liberalism equals Christianity. So any real Christian would know that if they say, hey, maybe we shouldn't allow you to have a Kali cult in Austin. That's obviously crazy. I mean, the gospel. Didn't you guys know? Were you listening to the Tim Keller podcast? The gospel says that external conformity is not enough. How dare you say we can't worship Vishnu publicly in Austin Town Square? That should be enough. So the first thing that they tried was to ignore it, but now Russell Moore is going to tell you his new aggressive approach to dealing with Doug.
Problem is, though, I think about an African-American young man who, with a group of other Black Christians, were part of this majority white conference movement that I was part of many years ago, who were talking about the fact that every time that they would raise the issue of, hey, maybe we ought to talk about where we ought to be on race, that these white leaders would say, oh, don't be controversial. Let's be patient. We don't want to be controversial. Then they saw them platforming Wilson, who is out there spouting all of.
Think of the blacks. Seriously, think of the blacks. This is the next strategy. Think of the poor blacks. They've had to deal all these years with Christians saying, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to talk about the James Cone stuff. No. Let's just be patient. This is all fantasy, by the way, of course, but let's just go with it. We're not going to do the DEI, Christian race, racial reconciliation stuff. No, we're not going to do that. And then think of the blacks, and he's he almost wants you to cry about this. They've had to deal with seeing Doug Wilson being platformed. Doug Wilson, the biggest racist of all time. Doug Wilson. Think of the blacks. We can't stay silent anymore.
This pro-slavery stuff and the misogynistic stuff and everything else, and realize, oh, wait, it's not that the problem is being controversial. The problem is that we're black.
Yes, that's the problem. The problem is that you're black. That's right.
We're talking about race. Problem is that we're talking about race as black people who actually want a Christian vision of justice and reconciliation.
Right.
That kind of silence in the face of this leads an awful lot of people. I mean, you think about that young man in your congregation who's saying, I don't know what it is to be a man. Maybe it is to become like this. Or that non-Christian who says, God ultimately.
You ever stop and ask the question, Russell Moore, like, this is what I wonder about these people, right? They've got all these losers in their audience that don't even know what it is to be a man. And then they let's just say Doug didn't really have the answer, right? Like, Doug has no answer for this. Like, his answer's scary and satanic and racist and all that stuff, right? And then they're upset because they follow Doug and become losers and all that kind of stuff, right? But maybe there's a more fundamental question that you need to answer, guys. I mean, I'm just spitballing here. I'm not really interested in helping you out, but sometimes the generous side of me just takes over, and I'm going to be generous right now. So you've got all these losers, and then they get tricked by Doug Wilson and his scary satanic, ideas. Maybe you should stop for a moment before you get all crazy and whine about Doug Wilson. You ever stop and think to yourself, why is it that we had all these guys in our churches that didn't know what it was to be a man? I mean, they've been following us for years. I mean, they've got all the Tim Keller books on their shelf. They've got David Platt on their shelves. They go to Secret Church. I mean, maybe we did something wrong. Maybe we were lacking in some area. Maybe it's our fault. Maybe we should take a look in the mirror, because we had all these guys that were so easily duped by the satanic idea that, Vishnu, is a demon, and maybe we shouldn't tolerate worshiping demons in our country. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it just seems like, you like to complain about this, but maybe it's your fault. But, listen, you don't have to take my advice. I'm one of those losers, so you don't need to think of what I think.
Is an angry, immoral being who's all about just propping up some sort of hierarchy and taking control and power over people's lives. That makes a huge difference. We have to model something different.
Propaganda, the rapper, has a song about Christian slave owners where he says, it must be nice not to have to think about race. I think about that constantly.
I remember Gosper. He thinks about the propaganda song constantly. It affects everything. It affects everything. Think about it, guys. Like, listen, if you haven't been convinced yet by Clarissa and Mike and Russell, think about this for a second. Think about the propaganda rap song. Must be nice not to think about race. Profound. Think about it.
In conversations like this, put yourself in the shoes of the people who are on the receiving end of these bad ideas. And in doing so, you understand the way that it's dehumanizing and demeaning and the rest of it, it ought to empower you to speak up when this stuff comes up.
Yeah, so think about it. Like, just think about the blacks, you know what I mean? We used to have in the old days, think about the children, the Simpsons joke. But please think of the children. Now it's think of the blacks. Think of what the blacks would think, right? So did you hear what Doug said? He said, maybe we shouldn't have tons of Muslims in one town in Michigan. Maybe that's not a good idea. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a good idea to have people with a completely different view of justice in control of an entire town. Maybe we shouldn't be importing more. Maybe that's a bad idea. Think about the blacks. Before you go with that, think about the blacks. What would they think?
The arguments from Black and Tan, the slavery apologia, the low-hanging fruit ought to be enough for us to jump in and say, hey, whatever else you want to think about.
Doug, this is the thing, too. Like, I read the original Black and Tan. I thought it was really good. Doug has walked a lot of that stuff back, but there's no mention of that here. There's no mention of that here. Nope, it's over. It's over. Doug is racist.
These political questions, these social questions, these cultural questions, this stuff is unquestionably problematic.
Unquestionably.
So let's let that stuff clear the decks in the conversation.
You notice it's like there's no explanation as to why. There was one, but it made no sense at all. It's problematic, it's scary, it's terrifying, it's satanic, it's insidious. It's all these descriptions of what it is without actually describing what it is. This is the level that most people who watch this stuff think. As long as you have a woman and some, effeminate men wringing their hands and, maybe pretending to cry and telling you that it's so scary and satanic, that's enough to convince so many people. That's enough.
And put whatever wording you're hearing, imagine it coming out of the mouth of Jesus Christ or vice versa. And it will be impossible to do that, which ought to tell you what is the Spirit of the Lord and what's the spirit of, as John would put it, Antichrist.
Listeners, if you want to hear more from Russell on the difference between patriotism and Christian nationalism, take a listen to episode 96 of The Russell Moore Show, where he answers a question about that very thing. We'll put a link to it in our show notes. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
They're tempting me here. They're tempting me to watch another episode of the show. Episode 96, the difference between patriotism and Christian nationalism. Now, the question I have to ask myself is, do I care? Do I care? And right now I'm thinking no. I don't think I care. But what I will say is if you care, then I care. If you care, then I care. And if you want me to listen to episode 96 or whatever she said there about Russell Moore's presentation on the difference between patriotism and Christian nationalism, maybe we can do it. Maybe we can do it. But in any case, I hope you found this video. Again, if you are an electrical engineer, you're looking for a base company to work for, do some real solid work. Look, it's not just a 1689 engineering company. It's an engineering company that is serious about making money, serious about engineering, but also serious about the Dominion mandate given to us by the Lord of Glory. Let me know and watch this video.
Fuego. Fuego, mi amor por ti es puro fuego. Fuego, puro fuego es mi amor por ti.
Hi, I'm Adam Robles with Covenant Recruiter, and I'm here to tell you about an engineering opportunity that's much more than just another job. This role is about combining technical excellence with a much bigger vision, one that impacts mankind's entire mission in life. I've partnered with Advancing Alternatives. They design the systems behind some of the world's most productive greenhouses, everything from intelligent motor controls to full environmental automation. But what truly sets them apart is not just the technology. They are a Christian-owned company, and their work is grounded in values like innovation, growth, service, community, and of overall faithfulness. Their mission is to help growers cultivate the earth responsibly with tools that make their work not only more efficient, but also more meaningful. They're looking for an electrical engineer to join them in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The role goes beyond CAD drawings and schematics. You'll own the full product lifecycle from concept and prototyping to testing and training. Also, you'll have a chance to see your designs in real-world production. You'll work on exciting projects, new electromechanical solutions, solar-powered systems, wireless interfaces, and greenhouse automation tools that directly impact how communities grow food and steward the land. This could be a good fit for you if you're strong with AutoCAD electrical and hands-on design. You have exposure to circuit design, PCBs, or embedded systems, especially if you love problem solving, learning new technology, and collaborating across teams. This could definitely be for you. But most importantly, I think, if you want your engineering career to be purpose-driven, serving growers, advancing sustainability, and reflecting the values of stewardship and excellence, this could definitely be for you. If that sounds like you, I'd love to hear from you. This is a place where you can innovate, grow, and be part of something bigger than yourself. If you're excited by challenge, learning, and meaningful impact, this opportunity could be the perfect fit. In Genesis, after creation, God blesses Adam and Eve, and he gives them a mandate, the dominion over everything that lives on the earth. Good engineering serves that mandate, and at Advancing Alternatives, they are keenly aware of this and work to that end. Reach out. Let's schedule a time to speak. We can talk more about the role itself and some of the details there, but also more about your background. Looking forward to it. God bless.